It's about Jeff and I having sex. And are you allowed to talk about that on Patreon? I will tell you about going no contact. So, you've decided to go no contact with your family? If you need a family, you can come hang out with me. Hi, love. Here are 3 ways to disrespect your elders.
This is Jeffrey Marsh, the creepiest, most narcissistic TikTok star to ever exist. Now, I know this is a bold claim, but believe me when I say this, you will definitely label him as such for yourself after watching this video. Jeffrey has mastered the art of selling controversy to gain more attraction and spotlight from the internet, and it's pretty obvious he's accomplished his goal. From promoting his Patreon to kids, where he clearly talks about sex, to bullying and doxing an innocent Muslim woman, Jeffrey's insanity is beyond your imagination. But putting that aside, his greatest achievements are the fact that his 2 books, How to Be You and Take Your Own Advice, became widely popular and even got him appraisal from the mainstream media. I don't even know how these medias even look at him as a mentally well person, let alone promote his creepy books. Jeffrey is a social media influencer, a trans activist and an author, but above all else, he's a predator and a child killer. The man who claims to deeply understand and care for the transgender community has shown himself to be uninformed and lacking greater insight than the people he frequently criticizes on his cringe videos. This was evident in one of his videos, where he failed to answer a very straightforward question posed by a curious individual.
I love this question, and I'm not going to answer it, for a very specific reason.
In this clip, the commenter was very curious to know how one can be both non-binary and transgender at the same time, what Jeffrey identifies as, but despite answering the question, he chose to say the same old wishy-washy motivational speech.
I value you so much, and I am so grateful that you want to use the correct language for people like me.
Jeffrey calls parents a problem and tries to put himself as a solution for kids, encouraging kids to talk to him privately.
Your parents screwed up. It's okay to say so. That's why I made a Patreon, so that we could talk about it, so that we could connect in a way that has more privacy, so that we could talk to each other in a way that's more open and stuff that we wouldn't share like in the comments of a video like this.
While having a Patreon isn't a problem by itself, encouraging underage kids to be on it and at the same time talking about sex and subjects that are clearly age inappropriate is a problem and a true danger to society. Hello, Patreoners. I want to tell you a story that I never have put on social media, that I never have told to anyone. It's about Jeff and I having sex. And are you allowed to talk about that on Patreon? This guy's like some creepy parody of an evil kids show host, literally telling his audience to disobey and distrust their own parents. It's so messed up because the whole point is to separate these kids from the very people who are trying to protect them from predators like him. A huge red flag right there.
Talk about it so that we could connect in a way that has more privacy, so that we could talk to each other in a way that's more open and stuff that we wouldn't share like in the comments of a video like this.
And then he takes it a step further, telling them to go completely no contact with their parents if they won't agree with their gender identity stuff. All of the things that we've covered up to this point are just the tip of the Jeffrey Marsh iceberg. In today's video, we'll dive deep into the Jeffrey Marsh manipulation tactics and unmask the predator who disguised as a trans activist and life coach. So who is Jeffrey? Jeffrey's from Pennsylvania, USA. Not much is out there about his early years, but one thing's for sure. His upbringing was rough. His parents were hardcore conservative Christians, and his mom was even a pastor. Imagine growing up in that environment while trying to figure out who you are. Yikes. He's been pretty open about these struggles he faced as a queer kid and the unbearable pain that came with it. But here's the kicker. He's never really spilled the tea on anything specific his parents did to him. It's like he's saying, yeah, it was rough, but let's not point fingers, which honestly feels like a pretty big move. Now at 47, Jeffrey calls himself a Buddhist, gender-bending life coach who identifies as non-binary. Basically, it means he's rocking his own vibe with makeup and clothes that some might call, well, questionable. Fun fact, in 2016, he gave an interview to Newsmax and claimed to be the first openly non-binary person to speak on national TV. First? Maybe. But let's be real, he's not the first guy to show up in bold makeup and outfits on TV, and he definitely won't be the last. Jeffrey didn't start his social media presence making the kind of videos he makes nowadays. He was actually a musician, or trying to be a musician. His music videos are nothing but cringe, and clearly he wasn't talented, but he still acted like one.
He says, each time I see you again.
At first, his videos were all about encouraging and spreading positivity for the marginalized LGBTQ community. He makes videos that help people accept their identity and love themselves.
If you give yourself permission to love what you love, to enjoy your life as it is, you'll start to have a better time. I can imagine, I don't have to imagine, I can remember being in high school and how difficult it was. Day after day, week after week.
But as time passed, his content became more of a cringe and all about blaming others for all of the bad things that happened in his life.
Nothing seems to upset a bigoted person more than a queer person who is happy. And it's because they are not happy. If I upset you, you're not happy, and that's not my problem. That's not my problem. That's not my problem.
Even people in the LGBTQ community are openly critical of him. The following video is a famous trans YouTuber who openly criticized Jeffrey for his actions.
This makes people money. You're a group. You're a group. It is economic. It's their job as these types of influencers to keep people afraid of trans folks and clicking on videos. They want to trade trans safety for money.
Why would trans people themselves trade their own safety for money? You are aware that trans people criticize you too. If not the most, because you're making us all look really bad, and you're appropriating our identity.
Jeffrey loves to go on about how he healed his childhood trauma at a Buddhist monastery, and how he's now all spiritual and peaceful. Honestly, it sounds great on paper, but his videos, they paint a completely different picture. This guy's anything but peaceful. If anything, he comes across as someone who's still deeply struggling and just doesn't know how to deal with it. He also tries to rationalize his creepy passive-aggressive vibe that his videos radiate.
See, to me, feelings are not a problem. I want you to get angry and stay angry.
He gets weirdly defensive and angry over the smallest things, like when someone asks him a basic question. Instead of handling it like the Zen guy he claims to be, he snaps and accuses them of being violent or unloving. It's honestly painful to watch because he doesn't even admit he's angry. It's written all over his voice and attitude. He's just projecting his own unhappiness onto other people, which is so unfair.
We spend so much of our time fighting bigots like this and screaming, it's okay to show children LGBTQ lives.
Honestly, this is terrible. How can someone preach about peace and love while being so quick to attack others? It's clear he's not happy on the inside. And instead of working on himself, he's pointing fingers at anyone who dares to question him. It's not just ironic, it's really sad to see someone so disconnected from the message they claim to stand for. From what Jeffrey's shared in his videos, he paints this pretty grim picture of his childhood. According to him, his dad treated him poorly, and all his problems at school and in life boil down to homophobia. But let's be real here, could it be that the real issue wasn't just other people, but maybe his own behavior? I mean, let's call it like it is. Being outwardly cringe, inappropriate, and constantly pushing boundaries isn't exactly a recipe for getting along with people. He's even talked about sneaking off with women's clothes as a kid, which, okay, could just be him exploring his identity, but it also makes you wonder what else he might have done that rubbed his family and peers the wrong way. I'm not saying his dad or classmates were saints, but Jeffrey's side of the story feels a little one-sided, you know? It's hard not to think there's more going on here than he's letting on. Like, what's the other side of the coin? Did his actions maybe escalate things or contribute to the tension? Honestly, it feels like there's a whole chunk of the story he's either skipping over or just doesn't want to admit. At one point, Jeffrey was really struggling, even suicidal. But apparently spending some time with a Buddhist monk helped him out. That's why he now calls himself a Buddhist and claims to be all about spirituality. But let's be honest, constantly blaming others for everything and snapping at anyone who questions him doesn't exactly scream enlightened to me. If anything, it's the opposite of what you'd expect from someone who's supposed to be spiritual.
I had a violent childhood. I don't know about you. I went to school and I got bullied, and then I went home and I got bullied there with violence sometimes. And if that was you, or if you had anything like that, you grew up in a chaotic or violent or unpredictable or selfish or please don't burden us kind of household. And now you're an adult, but you have this lingering gunk. I want to tell you to take a break.
And then there's the whole thing about his childhood trauma. He says he's overcome it, but let's be real, it doesn't seem like he's fully healed. The way he keeps blaming his family every chance he gets makes it feel like he's still stuck in the past. It's like instead of moving forward, he's just dragging that baggage with him and unloading it on everyone around him. To make things even worse, his online presence has stirred up a ton of backlash. People are calling him out for everything from his controversial advice to accusations of being a child groomer. Whether those accusations are true or not, they've definitely added fuel to the fire. It feels like Jeffrey's trying to position himself as some kind of spiritual guide, but his actions just don't line up with that image. Instead of inspiring people, he's leaving a trail of controversy wherever he goes. Jeffrey Marsh's videos where he tells kids to basically ghost their parents have stirred up a lot of drama, and not the good kind. People are seriously divided over this. In this video, he talks about this thing he calls no contact, which is basically cutting off all communication with parents who are, according to him, intolerant or disrespectful.
And so if you go no contact, if you decide to walk out of that relationship, here are 3 ways to go no contact. No contact. No contact. No contact. Going no contact. No contact. No contact.
On one hand, I get where he's coming from. No one should have to endure toxic behavior from family. But on the other hand, we're talking about kids here, and telling them to just cut off their parents feels like a huge leap. It's no surprise the backlash has been intense. Family relationships are complicated, and the idea of promoting something as extreme as this is bound to ruffle feathers. The controversy around this whole thing is even crazier when you consider that Jeffrey's advice is aimed at minors.
Hi, kids. Hey, kids. I want to talk to the kids.
Like, really? Telling kids to cut off their families? That's a whole new level of messy. People are not just skeptical, they're downright furious, pointing out all the ethical and legal issues that come with encouraging minors to isolate themselves from their parents. And let's not forget the bigger picture here. Why is he even doing this? A lot of people think it's less about helping kids and more about grabbing attention for himself. Let's be real, Jeffrey's social media presence has been on the decline for a while now, and this feels like a desperate attempt to stay relevant. Stirring up controversy is one way to get people talking, but doing it by targeting vulnerable kids and their family relationships? That's just low. So, at first, Jeffrey made it seem like this whole no contact thing was just going to be temporary, like, oh, just taking a little break. But let's be real, it's clear now that he's fully committed to cutting ties for good. In the video, he straight up admitted that he's completely cut off his family, no sugarcoating it.
So one of the things I needed to get over, I'm no contact with my family. All of them. Siblings, parents, extended family, cousins, everybody.
He might have just started with the idea of, I just need some space, but then realized along the way, nah, this is a permanent thing. It's wild to think about because going no contact with family isn't something most people take lightly. It makes you wonder what kind of journey he's been on to get to this point. Jeffrey's reason for going no contact with his family is pretty different from the usual cutting out toxic people situation we often hear about.
The beautiful thing about going no contact with my family was that it forced me to tell a different story to myself about myself.
In this video, he openly admitted that it had a lot to do with him deceiving himself and straying far from who he really is. It's almost like he's owning up to getting lost in his own head and losing touch with reality. This kind of thing shows up all the time in Jeffrey's super cringe motivational videos. He's always going on about how you should accept and love yourself exactly as you are and not try to change a thing. Like, okay, sure, self-acceptance is important, I'll give him that.
Maybe, just maybe, you are so bad at fixing what's wrong with you because there is nothing wrong with you. Maybe the whole concept of you living your whole life trying to fix what's wrong with you is what's wrong.
Half of his point is actually solid and can be really helpful for people who struggle with self-worth. But here's the catch, the other half of what he's saying is kind of a mess. Jeffrey comes across as totally anti-improvement, like he's allergic to the idea of fixing problems or making yourself better. It's almost like he's saying, hey, you're fine just the way you are, even if there are clear issues that need addressing. Honestly, it feels like he's skipping the part where growth and change are actually healthy and necessary sometimes. It's good to love yourself, yeah, but come on, there's nothing wrong with working on yourself too. While this advice of going no contact is already extremely dangerous, the deeper issue lies in how he positions himself as the alternative to their family, a loving, accepting, and supportive figure that these kids supposedly lack. His intention is clearly not only helping children to sever ties with their abusive families, but also about creating a dependency on him as their new parental figure, which is very, very dangerous and harmful for these kids.
Your parents screwed up. It's okay to say so. That's why I made a Patreon, so that we could talk about it, so that we could connect in a way that has more privacy, so that we could talk to each other in a way that's more open and stuff that we wouldn't share like in the comments of a video like this.
Well, Jeffrey doesn't only want kids with unsupportive and toxic parents, but also those who have positive parents. He even encourages them to cut contact with their family without thinking of the consequences at all.
If you are attempting to figure out if you want to go no contact, let me give you a tip. Go no contact first, before you figured it out.
The immediate harm of such advice lies in its potential to alienate children from their families, many of whom may not actually be in toxic or abusive situations. Impressionable children often lack the maturity to assess their relationships objectively, and this guidance can lead to unnecessary rifts, isolation, and emotional confusion. Many people, even prominent figures in the LGBTQ community, have widely condemned this practice, emphasizing that healthy family communication, counseling, and conflict resolution are more constructive ways to address familial issues than complete disconnection. However, this criticism merely scratches the surface of the deeper problem. Jeffrey's ultimate intention appears to be far more insidious and manipulative. By targeting minors in his videos, he fosters a sense of mistrust toward their families while simultaneously presenting himself as the ideal substitute.
Hi, beautiful. If you do not have a family that loves you, I'm going to be your family. I love you so much. Do you know what I love about you? You care so much. Your sensitivity is so beautiful. I actually think it's the best thing about you. You know what you deserve? Unconditional love, kindness, respect. I see the real you.
His messaging often includes invitations for children to reach out to him privately, subtly encouraging them to see him as a safe space, confidant, and even a parental replacement. What's even more disturbing is that he actually talks about very inappropriate subjects that young minds aren't mature enough to watch alone.
Hello, Patreoners. I want to tell you a story that I never have put on social media, that I never have told to anyone. It's about Jeff and I having sex. And are you allowed to talk about that on Patreon?
Talking about such topics in one's exclusive Patreon might be considered to be harmless for adults or even kids if they're guided by their parents, but Jeffrey had already made sure that these kids go no contact with their family so that he can groom them without their family knowing. Well, Jeffrey has never admitted talking about inappropriate things. In fact, he always claims that he is talking very good things that kids learn from.
We're not talking about age-inappropriate things. We're not talking about talking to kids about some of the deeper stuff that adults talk about in relationships. We're talking about, like on Scooby-Doo, Velma being an LGBTQ character and why that's good for kids.
Well, I don't think there's anything more deep and inappropriate than talking about one's sex life in an exclusive Patreon to kids. It gets even creepier than this. There's a clip of Jeffrey Marsh where he's actually encouraging people to ghost their family just because they support Trump. Like, seriously? Apart from being straight up intolerant and disrespectful, it really says a lot about Jeffrey himself.
Hi. Should you cut off contact with family members just because they are voting for Donald Trump? Yes.
Oh?
If so far they have not been able or willing to listen to compassion, to listen to kindness, to listen to you, or even to do their own research and discover that hatred's not the answer, that love and kindness is the answer. If they are unwilling to change, they must experience consequences.
Oh?
And you should not withhold those consequences from them. The consequence in this case would be they don't get your beautiful, loving, wonderful presence in their lives. It's over. And they are gone. You need to make it real for yourself.
Think about it. He's basically weaponizing these kids' relationships with their own families just to push whatever hate he's carrying inside. It's honestly kind of sad when you look at it that way. Instead of promoting understanding or healthy dialogue, he's pushing division. And it's so clear that this reflects the bitterness or anger he has in his own heart. Honestly, it's messed up. Family isn't perfect, but cutting them off over political differences? That's just next level toxic. It makes me wonder, how does he think this helps anyone? It doesn't. It just spreads more hate and nobody wins. The practice of targeting vulnerable minors in this way raises serious ethical and safety concerns. It not only undermines the role of families in a child's life, but also places an undue amount of trust and influence in the hands of an individual who has no accountability or formal responsibility toward these children. But for Jeffrey, this has never been an issue. In fact, he accuses those who question him as violent and intolerant, and he says they come after him just because he's so powerful.
When you are triggering them and upsetting them, it is because of your power, and that's when they want to stop you. It's just logic.
But is Jeffrey really a very nice, supportive, and loving person as he claims to be? Well, you'll find out now. Jeffrey Marsh likes to paint this picture of himself as this super loving, accepting, and supportive person. You know, the type who's all about self-love and understanding. But honestly, when you see some of the things he says, like telling people to ghost their own family over politics, it really makes you wonder. Like, how does that line up with being accepting or loving? To me, it feels like there's this huge disconnect between the image he tries to project and the actual message he's pushing.
I just think you're cute. I was wondering if you ever considered that you're a gift to everyone. How are you doing today? If it seems like nobody else cares, I care. I care about you. I love you very, very much. Please take the best care today.
He routinely accuses conservatives of being intolerant and violent, even claiming that parents are incapable of loving their children properly. But his actions tell a very different story. one riddled with hypocrisy and cruelty. One of the best examples of this was his interaction with a Muslim female TikToker named Shumara Nessa. Shumara confronted Jeffrey about his grooming behaviors, particularly his encouragement of young kids to cut ties with their parents and join his Patreon.
Stop telling kids to go on your Patreon and chat to you privately without their parents knowing.
And then a lot of people made stitches of me saying I'm transphobic, I've done a lot of bad stuff.
In a now deleted video, Shumara exposed Jeffrey of being a manipulative child groomer. The fact her videos got deleted is also the result of influence and harassment from Jeffrey's side.
Your parents screwed up. It's okay to say so. Beautiful. If you do not have a family that loves you, I'm going to be your family.
No, you can't. You are a stranger on the internet. You are not their family. You're teaching this more on... because this video might get flagged. That's why I don't want to say the word.
So I just got an email saying, pretty much a threat, saying they know where I live. They have got my daughter's details on the email, like what time I leave to drop them to school, pick them up. And it's not a coincidence because both of my daughters, they go to 2 different schools, so they know.
Now here's where it gets absolutely horrifying. Instead of addressing her concerns or engaging in a meaningful dialogue, Jeffrey chose to harass Shumara relentlessly. He didn't just stop at criticizing her, he doxed her, exposing her personal information online, and encouraged his followers to attack her. That's right, a self-proclaimed advocate for love and acceptance weaponized his fanbase against an innocent woman. And it gets worse. The harassment escalated to terrifying levels. Jeffrey's followers didn't just attack Shumara online, they went after her car, vandalizing her property. But the most disturbing part of all this, they threatened her children. Yes, her children. And when all this happened, what's Jeffrey's response to his followers?
Thank you. Thank you for being a trans ally. Thank you for your big heart. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your support. You might have noticed it's, things are a little hairy on the LGBTQ front with hate and hateful people.
In a heartbreaking video, Shumara tearfully shared how Jeffrey's followers obtained the address of her 2 daughters and sent warnings to harm them. Just imagine, your children's safety threatened because you spoke out against someone's unethical actions. This is beyond terrible. This is vile. Honestly, how can someone who claims to stand for love and acceptance stoop to such a level? It's not just bad, it's evil. Jeffrey's actions are not just hypocritical, they're outright dangerous. A man who accuses others of intolerance and violence has become the very embodiment of those traits. And this is a clear implication to Jeffrey's evil intentions beyond his words of love and being compassionate. This is utterly unacceptable, and it's horrifying to think about the trauma this mother and her children endured simply because she dared to speak the truth. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and influence in the hands of individuals who have no regard for the well-being of others. Jeffrey's just disgusting and hypocritical, but Jeffrey's folders of bad behavior aren't done yet. His manipulative relationship with his boyfriend is even more shocking. Jeffrey Marsh has a boyfriend with the same first name, Jeffrey Leonard Freeman, and their relationship has spanned over 14 years. But is this really the loving and genuine relationship that Jeffrey so confidently claims? Well, buckle up, because what lies beneath might just be the most disturbing and shocking revelation you've ever seen. From the outside, it all seems picture perfect. Long-term commitment, mutual support, and all those relationship goals moments Marsh loves to highlight.
After all these years, we still love each other so much. For over a decade now, we've been texting each other every night 5 things we love about each other. And it's just a reset on unconditional love. I, as a non-binary person, have found a happy ending with someone who loves me with his whole heart and sees the real me and celebrates me. And I feel like the luckiest person alive.
But when you dig deeper, cracks begin to show. There's a subtle, almost invisible power dynamic that makes you wonder, is Freeman truly a partner? Or is he more like a carefully managed piece in Marsh's narrative? The way Marsh controls the public narrative, the constant emphasis on perfection, and the lack of Freeman's own voice in their story, it's all a little too calculated. All right, buckle up, because this just gets weirder. So there's this clip floating around where Jeffrey Marsh and his husband Jeffrey Leonard Freeman were talking about their past and the time before their marriage.
And we both didn't think we would ever get married.
No, I did, but I
you did?
I thought it would be to a woman.
No way.
Well, that's what society...
Who am I married to?
No, that's what society told me.
And here's the kicker. Freeman suddenly drops this bombshell, saying he never expected to marry a queer person and had always thought he'd marry a woman. Like, excuse me, what? That's not just an innocent comment, that's a huge red flag waving in the wind, right? It's almost like you can feel the awkward tension in the room after he says it. Marsh brushes it off, of course, with one of those overly charming smiles.
Oh, yeah, well, you kind of got there. In a way, in a version.
True.
Kids want their future back. We had to learn how to love each other.
Yes.
And to also accept that someone else could love us. Because without seeing any examples, I didn't know that that was even possible or something I, deserved or could have.
But seriously, doesn't that imply some level of manipulation? I mean, if Freeman went into this relationship thinking one thing and then somehow ends up in a completely different situation, it makes you wonder who's calling the shots here. And can we talk about how Freeman looks in every other clip of them together? Like the poor guy constantly has this worried, stressed out expression plastered on his face.
Okay, the first mistake to avoid is not being vulnerable. Trying to project for your partner some perfect version of yourself. You're gonna have to show the seams, show the mistakes, show the vulnerabilities if you really want to connect. Because somebody, if you're asking them to love you, they have to know you. They have to know the real you.
All right, let's get into it, because the whole thing just screams predator vibes. In that clip, Jeffrey Marsh and his husband Jeffrey Leonard Freeman are supposedly talking about what to avoid in a relationship. But honestly, what's more disturbing is the relationship dynamic they're showing us. Marsh completely takes over the conversation, dominating every word, while Freeman just sits there looking like he's stuck in some twisted trap. Seriously, take a close look at Freeman's face. The guy is visibly uncomfortable. His eyes, they're practically begging for help, like he's mentally mapping out the nearest escape route. And Marsh? Oh, Marsh is doing what he does best, talking over him, controlling the narrative, and making it crystal clear who's in charge. It's not just uncomfortable to watch, it's cruel. The power imbalance is painfully obvious, and Marsh seems to revel in it. There's this moment in the clip where Freeman shifts awkwardly, and you can tell he's trying so hard not to rock the boat. It's like he knows that even hinting at disagreement would trigger some kind of reaction from Marsh. And that's where it gets dark. Marsh's behavior isn't just controlling, it's downright predatory. He's not creating a safe space for Freeman, he's feeding off his discomfort. There's this eerie sense that Marsh thrives on being the one in control, the one who decides what's said, how it's said, and who gets to speak. And let's be honest, Freeman's barely allowed to speak at all. And let's not forget that earlier clip where Freeman admitted he never expected to marry a queer person, saying he thought he'd marry a woman. How does someone go from that to ending up with someone like Marsh? It's hard not to see the manipulation at play here. Marsh seems to have completely rewritten the narrative of their relationship to fit his version of events, and Freeman is just stuck playing along. You know what this feels like? It feels like Marsh is curating their relationship for the public, shaping the narrative to make everything look peachy, while Freeman's over there silently screaming, "Help me!" Okay, maybe not screaming, but you get the point. This isn't the dynamic of a healthy, balanced relationship. It's got the hallmarks of someone pulling the strings and someone else just going along with it. And if you thought Jeffrey Marsh's behavior in his relationship was unsettling, wait until you hear this. It gets even more bizarre, because now we're moving from predatory dynamics to outright denial of basic biology. Yup, you heard that right.
Here is Madison Cawthorn's definition of a woman. X chromosomes, no tallywhacker. And this gives me a chance to talk about biological essentialism. First of all, it's not true.
So here's Jeffrey Marsh in a clip literally denying the biology of women having X chromosomes. Like, seriously? This guy's out here acting like basic science doesn't exist. And let's be real, it's not even shocking at this point. This is the same person who's been telling kids there's no such thing as boys or girls. Like the concept of gender is just some made-up fairy tale. It's not just bizarre, it's irresponsible.
Hi, kids. There's no such thing as a boy or a girl, and I can prove it.
This is crazy, but what's even more cringe is the reasoning behind this claim. So in this clip, Jeffrey Marsh is trying to argue that there's no such thing as boys or girls because some women are taller than some men. Yeah, you heard that right.
So gather around the family, the parents, everybody, answer my questions. You either say boys or girls. Who's usually taller? Oh, boys? Okay. But you've met some short boys, right? You met some tall girls. So usually boys are taller, but not always. Okay. Who likes the color pink? Girls? Okay. But you've met girls who don't like pink. And you met boys who do like pink. So usually girls like pink, but not always. Everything you can think of that makes a boy or makes a girl is usually, but not always. And some of them are not even usually. Where does that leave you?
Yup, that's his big reason. Like what? That's the kind of logic that makes you want to bang your head against a wall. Just because there are exceptions to a general rule doesn't mean you throw the whole concept out the window. It's like saying cats and dogs don't exist because, hey, some dogs are smaller than cats. It's absolutely wild. The insanity doesn't stop here. He even dared to say that biological sex is fake.
Sex is fake.
And this is the same guy who's been telling kids that boys and girls are just made-up concepts. It's not just bizarre, it's irresponsible. Kids need clarity and guidance, not this kind of chaotic messaging that leaves them more confused about basic facts of life. Honestly, this whole no such thing as boys or girls thing isn't just cringe, it's terrible. Teaching kids that exceptions somehow invalidate the reality of biological categories is setting them up for a lifetime of confusion. And if all of that wasn't enough, Jeffrey goes even further. Speaking directly to the kids, he says, "You might even be like me, neither a boy nor a girl."
Maybe you're even like me, and you're not a boy or a girl.
Like what? He's basically planting the idea in their heads that they don't even fit into basic biological categories. Instead of offering clarity or support, he's just throwing more confusion into the mix. Seriously, how is this helping anyone? It's no surprise that this has sparked a ton of controversy. A lot of people are calling him out, and honestly for good reason. Jeffrey is a menace to society, a problem that's actively making things worse. Instead of encouraging healthy discussions about individuality and identity, he's tossing out wild claims and targeting kids with them. Kids are already navigating a complicated world. The last thing they need is someone telling them that the basics like being a boy or a girl aren't even real. Now, don't get me wrong, conversations about gender and identity are super important, and society has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to understanding these things, but flat out denying biology, that's not thought-provoking, it's just confusing. And the fact that he's aiming this message at kids makes it even more problematic. Now, if you think this is the worst thing Jeffrey teaches in his videos, you'd be completely wrong. You'll find out why in the following clip.
God is non-binary.
Alright, so here's Jeffrey Marsh at it again, stirring the pot by claiming that God is non-binary. Yep, he actually said that. And his reasoning? Buckle up for this one. He says because the Bible mentions God created humans in his image, and since there are boys and girls, that must mean God is neither male nor female. Like what? That's the kind of logic that makes you sit there scratching your head.
If man is made in God's image and woman is made in God's image, and there's one God, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
It's such a massive stretch that it feels more like a way to stir up drama than to actually make a meaningful point. First of all, anyone who's read the Bible knows that interpretation matters. And this take, It's way out of left field. By that logic, is God also short and tall, or both a morning person and a night owl? See how silly this gets. But Jeffrey seems to love these kinds of wild statements that are guaranteed to push buttons and spark controversy. The backlash has, of course, been massive. People are calling it disrespectful, blasphemous, and just plain ridiculous. And honestly, can you blame them? For many, faith is sacred, and twisting scripture to fit your own narrative isn't just tone deaf, it's downright offensive. But wait, it gets even more absurd. As if claiming that God is non-binary wasn't controversial enough, Jeffrey decided to take things a step further by comparing himself to Jesus. Yup, you heard that right. He didn't just stop at reinterpreting scripture, he went full on, I'm basically Jesus 2.0 mode. And trust me, this next part will have you shaking your head even harder. Let's dive into this wild claim.
Compared to Jesus a lot on this channel and many others. And let's go down our little list. Number 1, preaching love in a world that's very hateful. Yes, check. We both do that. Preaching love so well, the message has so much truth and depth that the religious leaders and conservatives of our time want us DEAD. Yes, both Big J and myself. True. Not just DEAD, but discredited, dehumanized, outcast. And number 3, we have so much love to give that we even preach love for those who are caught up in hating us the most. True and true.
This one takes the cake. Jeffrey Marsh actually compared himself to Jesus. Yep, you heard that right. He's claimed he's just like Jesus because according to him, they both give so much love. And that's why these so-called religious people want both of them dead. Let's take apart this ridiculous argument piece by piece. First of all, Jesus didn't just give so much love. He preached forgiveness, turned the other cheek, and literally died for humanity. Meanwhile, Jeffrey's idea of love seems to be stirring up controversy, mocking people's deeply held religious beliefs, and throwing insults at anyone who questions him. That's not love, that's ego. And let's not forget that Jesus was all about humility, while Jeffrey's entire shtick revolves around centering himself in every conversation and acting like the world revolves around him. And his claim that religious people want him dead because he's spreading love? Seriously, Jeffrey, the backlash you're getting has nothing to do with love and everything to do with your behavior. You mock religion, twist sacred teachings, and alienate people with your divisive rhetoric. That's not spreading love, it's creating chaos. Comparing this to Jesus' crucifixion isn't just absurd, it's deeply disrespectful to people who hold their faith dear.
Jesus loves the LGBTQs. Does he not? The Bible says so.
What's even worse is how his actions have made him a scapegoat for the conservative and religious communities, dragging the trans community into the mess with him. It's disgusting because there are so many trans individuals out there who just want to live their lives in peace, and Jeffrey's antics are making it harder for them. Instead of advocating for the trans community in a meaningful way, he's adding fuel to the fire and giving critics more ammunition. It's selfish and harmful. And let's be real, his so-called love is only directed toward a tiny corner of the trans community. For everyone else, it's bullying and doxing. Plain and simple. Just look at what he did to that Muslim TikToker, who he doubled down, doxed, and unleashed a wave of harassment on her. That's not love, that's cruelty. For the longest time, many people looked up to Jeffrey as a hero of the LGBTQ+ community, someone who is fighting for acceptance and understanding. But now, a lot of those same people are waking up to the hidden agenda he's holding, one that's less about equality and more about self-serving predator-like behavior. And let's not sugarcoat it, his actions, especially towards kids, are deeply concerning. Many now consider Jeffrey a threat to society, particularly to children. And these accusations aren't just coming from conservatives, they're also coming from members of the trans community who see the damage his behavior is doing to their fight for acceptance. Watching his videos with their disturbing undertones and predator vibes, it's hard not to feel like these are very real and valid concerns. At the end of the day, if someone's actions are raising red flags across the board, from conservatives to LGBTQ+ advocates, it's time to stop brushing it off and start addressing the serious issues at hand. Protecting kids and ensuring genuine advocacy for marginalized communities should always come first. And that's where Jeffrey has completely missed the mark.